Hey there fellow adventurers, welcome to another exciting video where today we're diving into the epic world of Etheria Restart. If you're into turn-based RPGs with a dystopian twist, you're in for a treat. This game throws you into a wild, chaotic world where you'll need to build your ultimate squad of animuses to take down some seriously freaky anomalies. With over 40 unique characters to summon, it's easy to feel overwhelmed when putting together your dream team of 4. But don't worry, we've got your back. In this video, we're breaking down the ultimate tier list for Etheria Restart to help you crush your enemies and dominate the battlefield. Whether you're aiming for the best synergy, raw power, or just want to know who's worth your precious resources, we'll cover everything you need to know. So, grab your summoning stones, buckle up, and let's jump into the world of Etheria to find out who truly deserves a spot on your squad. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking characters in Etheria Restart. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of tier list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Aegis Andrew, Striker Andrew, Researcher number 41, Vice Ashu, Kachi, and Siebel. Oh boy, let's dive into the D tier animus in Anime Reborn, or as I like to call them, the bench warmers of the multiverse. These poor souls might look cool on paper, but trust me, they're about as useful as a sword made of jello. Let's break down why these units are the ones you'll want to avoid. Or, sell for resources faster than you can say, gotcha luck. First up is Aegis Andrew, the odd type tank animus. I mean, tanks are supposed to protect your team, right? Well, Andrew clearly didn't get the memo. This guy can't hold a line to save his life. Or yours. He's got no utility, no solid defense mechanics, and honestly, the only thing he's tanking is your roster space. Do yourself a favor and cash him in for resources ASAP. Then there's Striker Andrew, who promises DPS but delivers disappointment. As a reason type animus, you'd expect him to bring some solid firepower to the table. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. His damage output is so low, you might as well use a wet noodle as a weapon. If you're still holding on to him after the early game, let me save you the trouble. Don't. Researcher number 41 is next, and listen, I feel bad for this one. A constant type support. Animus sounds promising, right? Someone to heal your wounds, maybe buff your team? Nope, she's about as supportive as a chair missing 3 legs. Sure, she's okay for the first hour of gameplay, but once you've got better units, it's time to send her packing. Resources don't grow on trees, you know. Now let's talk about Vice, an odd type DPS animus who, at first glance, might trick you into thinking they're worth keeping around. Early game? Sure, they're fine. But as soon as you hit the mid game, their damage output falls off a cliff. You'll be left wondering why you ever wasted your time on them. Pro tip, sell them before the regret kicks in. Ashu, the Halo-type DPS animus, is next on the chopping block. And let's be real, this unit's performance is about as hollow as their type name suggests. Damage? Barely. Utility? Not a chance. If you're using Ashu, it's either because you're a diehard fan of underdogs or you just don't know any better. Either way, this one's a hard pass. Finally, we have Kachi and Siebel, the dynamic duo of disappointment. Kachi's reason type skill set is all over the place, and not in a fun, chaotic way, more like why does this even exist? Meanwhile, Siebel can sort of help you through the first chapter, but that's it. Once you're past that, it's time to wave goodbye and let them fulfill their true destiny, being sold for resources. So there you have it folks, the D tier Hall of Shame. If these units were contestants in a talent show, they'd all get buzzed off in the first round. But hey, at least they're good for something, right? Even if that something is padding your resource stash. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts, or better yet, who you'd rather have in your squad, in the comments below. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Victor, Dorothy the Wisher, Rin, Chiaki, RC77, Yang, Obel, Kazuyo, The Reverie, Sanya, and Tsutomu. Alright, anime warriors, let's get into the nitty gritty of C tier units in Anime Reborn, or as I like to call them, the bench warmers you want to love, but they're making it hard. These animus aren't outright disasters, but let's just say they won't be carrying your team anytime soon. Still, some of them have quirks that might make them situationally useful, or at least fun to experiment with. Ready? Let's dive in. First up, we've got Victor, our disorder type wildcard. On paper, he's got a balanced skill set with self-healing and the potential to dish out more damage as his HP drops. Sounds promising, right? But the reality? He's kind of that guy who shows up to the gym but skips leg day. He can't tank well, and his damage is meh, unless he's on the verge of fainting. Basically, Victor feels like an emotional support unit for your enemies. He tries, but they're not impressed. Then there's Dorothy the Wisher, who honestly should have wished for a better skill set. She's a reason type supporter who's supposed to buff your allies, but her buffs are about as consistent as trying to win the lottery. And her DPS? Yeah, don't even ask. Dorothy's the kind of unit you pull and think, maybe I'll figure her out, but then she just sits in your inventory collecting dust. Now, let's talk about Rin, the tank that's not really a tank. She's got some AoE crowd control, which sounds awesome until you realize her HP pool looks more like a kiddie pool. Sure, she can taunt enemies and self-heal a bit, but in PvP, she's about as intimidating as a puppy barking at a lion. PvE? Well, let's just say she's viable, if you're feeling generous. Moving on, Chiaki is your classic healer. She's Reason type, and her whole deal is healing. Like, that's it. No DPS, no defense. She's just there waving her tiny medkit while the rest of your team does the heavy lifting. If you love pure support units, she's your gal. But in PvP, oh honey, she's a sitting duck waiting to get roasted. Then we have RC77, an odd type debuffer animus that's trying really hard to be useful. He's got some CC and can stun enemies, but here's the kicker, it's not guaranteed. That's right, his stun might or might not work, leaving you in a suspenseful cliffhanger every time. And his damage output? Let's just say he's more of a tickle the enemies kind of guy. Now for Yang, who's trying to do it all, support, DPS, you name it, but ends up being kind of bad at everything. He's like the kid who signs up for every extracurricular but doesn't excel in any of them. Sure, you might find a way to squeeze some value out of him, but in most cases, you're better off picking someone who knows what they're doing. And who could forget Obol, the odd type DPS animus who shines in boss battles but crumbles in PvP? His damage over time skills are cool, but he's got no defense and almost no crowd control. Think of him as a glass cannon, if glass cannons also happen to miss half their shots. Finally, we've got Kazuyo the Reverie, Sanya, and Tsutomu, each bringing their own brand of mediocrity. Kazuyo can make enemies fall asleep, but the sleep gets cancelled the moment they take damage. Sanya can revive teammates, but her cooldowns are so long you could take a coffee break before her skills are ready again. And Tsutomu, he's got single target burst damage that slaps in PvP, but in PvE, his lack of AoE makes him feel like a one-trick pony. So that's the C tier gang. Quirky, occasionally useful, but mostly sitting on the sidelines while the A tier and S tier units steal the spotlight. If you're determined to make them work, kudos to you, but don't be surprised if they leave you asking, why do I do this to myself? Let me know if you found any secret strats with these units. I'm all ears. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Dorothy, Catching the Guard, Dieting, Turandot, Kazuyo, Dinah, Fangus, Oboro, Kraken, Chiaki the Echo, and Viper. Alright, let's get real for a second, because if you're like me, you're constantly asking, which B tier unit is actually worth the grind in Anime Reborn? Well, buckle up, because I've got the lowdown on every B tier hero. Some of them shine in very specific situations, while others might leave you scratching your head, wondering why you even gave them a shot. Let's dive in. First up, Dorothy. This SR rarity support is an absolute gem if you're looking for AoE healing that actually matters. Plus, she's constant type, meaning she gets that sweet type advantage in many fights. Oh, and her regen buffs? Chef's kiss. But here's the kicker, she hits like a wet noodle. Don't expect her to carry the team in damage, and she's an easy target. Keep her safe though, and she'll have your squad singing praises. Moving on to Catching the Guard, who might just be one of the best SR tanks you can get. Whether it's PvP or PvE, this guy's disorder type advantage lets him stand his ground in almost any brawl. He's sturdy, reliable, and great in a pinch. The downside, he doesn't really play well with others. His synergy with teammates leaves a lot to be desired. Still, for what he does, being an immovable wall, he's solid. Now let's talk Dieting, the single target burst damage machine. This DPS powerhouse is perfect for PvP, where taking out squishy enemies is the name of the game. Not only does he boost his own crit rate, but his damage output is just chef's kiss. The catch? His AoE potential is non-existent. If you're up against like hordes of enemies, Dieting is more like a side dish than the main course. Turandot is next on the list, a reason type buffer who wants to be great but just doesn't quite make it. Sure, she can dispel enemy buffs and pump her own ATK and DEF stats, which sounds amazing on paper, but in practice, her DPS is laughable and she's as fragile as they come. Use her wisely and she can shine in support roles, but don't expect her to carry the team. And then there's Kazuyo, a reason type support who's all about cooldown reduction and SPD buffs for your squad. If you're looking for someone to speed things up, Kazuyo's your guy, but just like Dorothy, he can't fight to save his life, literally. His support game is inconsistent, making him a situational pick at best. Let's not forget Fangus, the ranged damage dealer who thrives in PvE. This reason type hero can dish out some impressive AoE damage with DOT effects to boot. However, his survivability is tragic. High risk, high reward is the name of the game with Fangus, but if the enemy even sneezes at him, he's done for. Rounding out the list are Oboro and Kraken. Oboro's single target burst damage makes him a PvP staple, especially with his slow and DEF reduction debuffs. But PvE, forget about it. Kraken, on the other hand, is a tanky odd type hero who's surprisingly good at crowd control thanks to his AoE and single target abilities. But as a DPS, he's more like a kitten than a Kraken. So there you have it, your comprehensive rundown of Anime Reborn's B tier units. They might not be top tier, but hey, if you know how to play to their strengths, they can hold their own. Let me know in the comments who your go-to B tier hero is, and if you think any of them deserve a spot in the A tier club. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Veronica, Chloros, Hellkid, Tiamat, Lingluo, Hoyan, Lilith, Rahu, Selint, Lian, Valerian, and Grey. Alright, so you're looking for some solid recommendations for A tier units in Anime Reborn, huh? Well, buckle up, because we've got a bunch of powerhouse heroes here that are going to seriously make your team shine in PvP and PvE. Let's dive into this list of epic units, and trust me, you'll want to grab them all. First up is Veronica. Now, Veronica is like the stealthy assassin you didn't know you needed. She's a reason type damage dealer, which means she can dish out some decent AoE damage while stealing buffs from enemies. Seriously, when you have her in your squad, she thrives in PvP. The more buffs the enemy has, the stronger she becomes. Her reliance on enemy buffs might sound a bit tricky, but if you use her right, she's a menace. Next, we've got Chloros, who's all about that single target burst damage. If you need someone to take out an enemy fast, Chloros is your go-to. The guy can unleash a chain of destruction with his chain lock debuff and insane burst damage. He's amazing in PvP and boss battles, but don't expect him to handle AoE damage. It's just not his thing. But if you're looking for someone who can deliver a knockout blow, Chloros is your man. Hellkid is another gem in this A tier lineup. Now, Hellkid isn't just a damage dealer, he's a support powerhouse too. He can shield allies, make them immune to debuffs, and even stun enemies with his basic attacks. On top of that, he has a solid AoE attack that can weaken enemy ATK. Whether you're in PvE or PvP, Hellkid has your back, and that makes him super valuable in any situation. Moving on, we've got Tiamat. Tiamat is a tank who's got that perfect balance of offense and defense. She can taunt enemies, deal decent damage when her HP is low, and even heal herself. But here's the kicker. Her ultimate form has some insane AoE damage potential, making her an absolute beast. The only downside? She can self-harm a bit too much. But if you can manage her health, Tiamat is a total game changer. Then there's Lingluo, a true odd type healer who's a lifesaver in Etheria Restart. She can continuously heal the whole team with AoE healing, and on top of that, she can extend buffs by an extra turn. She's pretty much the healer you'll want to have in every battle. Double healing, continuous support, and she can make your team nearly unstoppable with her buff extensions. Speaking of high damage, we can't skip over Hoyan. If you're a fan of single target burst DPS, Hoyan is your go-to. She can land some heavy hits and even apply the anti-heal debuff with her basic attacks, making her incredibly useful in PvP. Her ultimate, it almost guarantees a KO. Unfortunately though, Hoyan isn't going to help much in AoE situations. But if you're looking to crush a single target, she's the one to do it. Let's talk about Lilith now. If you need someone who's got crowd control covered, Lilith is a great choice. She's one of the best AoE CC animus in the game, and she's also got a decent tanking ability. While she's not the top performer in PvE or boss modes, in PvP she can cause some serious problems for your enemies, making her an essential pick for those who love messing with the opponent's plans. Last but definitely not least, Rahu is another powerhouse worth mentioning. Rahu brings strong AoE potential and is a consistent damage dealer. Not only can he debuff enemies, but he can also buff himself and even double attack. Plus, his basic attacks can lower enemy DEF while boosting his own. Whether you're trying to tank or deal damage, Rahu is an all-around solid pick for any team. And there you have it. These A tier units are going to give your team a massive boost, whether you're playing in PvP or grinding through some tough PvE content. Every one of these heroes brings something unique to the table, and if you can make the most of their strengths, your squad will dominate like never before. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Doki Doki, Messiah, Shadow Sania, Heinrich, Lily, Kloss, Beyontin, and Shiada. Alright, let's dive right into some of the absolute powerhouse units in Anime Reborn that will have you grinning from ear to ear. These characters are the heavy hitters that can change the course of any battle. So if you're looking to step up your game, stick around because we're talking about the cream of the crop here. First up, we've got Doki Doki, and let me tell you, this support unit is a game changer. One of the strongest support animus in Etheria Restart. She's got buffs that can make your team immune to debuffs. Oh, and did I mention she's also a constant type? That means she laughs in the face of type disadvantages. Seriously, if you're looking to keep your team alive and thriving through thick and thin, Doki Doki's your girl. Next, let's talk about Messiah. Now, if you're a fan of AoE DPS, this guy is your dream come true. He's got one of the highest AoE potentials in the game, and on top of that, he becomes invincible after unleashing his ult. I mean, what's not to love about that? If you're up for wrecking whole enemy teams while staying untouchable, Messiah's got you covered. Then there's Shadow Sania, who brings the debuff support game to a whole new level. If your strategy revolves around breaking down your opponents and making them regret every move they make, this disorder type powerhouse is exactly what you need. With an insane AoE and DOT skill set, she's got the tools to cripple enemies and let your team shine. Moving on to Heinrich, the king of burst DPS in Etheria Restart. This guy's not just a powerhouse in terms of raw damage, but he also throws in anti-heal for good measure, meaning enemies can't just heal through his insane damage output. Best used in late game PvP, Heinrich will have your opponent sweating as they try to keep up with the blitz of damage. Now, don't forget about Lily, one of the most well-rounded support animus you'll find. She's the perfect mix of DPS, AoE, and support skills, which makes her an absolute beast in PvE. If you're gearing up for some serious PvE content, you'll want Lily in your corner to keep things balanced and under control while still bringing the hurt when needed. Kloss is up next, and let me tell you, this guy's a debuffer with a mission. If you're up against odd type compositions, you better bring out Kloss, as his hollow type debuffs will make them quiver. His AoE capabilities are strong, and his ability to reduce enemy DEF, along with inflicting irremovable debuffs, is a huge asset in battle. If your enemies are getting too cocky, Kloss will be there to put them in their place. Let's give it up for Beyontin, the ultimate all-around support unit. If you're rocking a Reason type team, you know how powerful this guy can be. Not only does he double the team's DPS, but he's got this insane ability to continuously revive dead allies every turn. I'm talking about some serious overpowered support here, folks. Having Beyontin in your team is like having a safety net, a damage amplifier, and a healer all rolled into one. Finally, we've got Shiada, who can absolutely demolish any battlefield with her AoE damage. An odd type damage dealer, she's a great counter to Reason type compositions, and her DPS just keeps going up. Not to mention, her burst AoE damage can wipe out entire teams in no time. If you need a hard-hitting DPS unit, look no further than Shiada. She'll deal with your enemies in style. So there you have it, these Anime Reborn units are some of the best you'll find, and they'll definitely make a difference in your battles. Whether you're looking for top-tier DPS, support, or debuff in action, these characters will keep your team rocking and rolling. If you've got them on your roster, you're in for a fun time. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.